Most of what I learned at Google was very much in line with my value system of trying to make the world a better place. One of the famous projects that Google X worked on is the self-driving car project. That's a big moonshot. What made me successful at Google is happiness. I think that the 10 million happy mission is the entire universe that's been conspiring to make this work. We can impact the world around us so much by focusing our actions on what really matters. Ali was the person that mattered to me most in life. He was my son, he was my best friend, and he was my coach on the topic of happiness. Life was here when I hugged him for the last time. It dropped all the way down here. Do I want to stay here? Ali never hid anything from me other than one thing. He used his allowance when he was 16 years old to get a tattoo on his back. The gravity of the battle means nothing to those at peace. The event in itself has no power to make you happy or unhappy. It's the way you process the event in your head that makes you happy or unhappy. If we just practice that gratitude, see the truth of how amazing our lives are, we're going to be fine.
This week on the show, we have Mo Gawdat, and he's the Chief Business Officer for Google X. That's the secret dark community inside Google that works on these things called moonshots, like self-driving cars, spaceships to Mars, all of that stuff. And he has a new book called Solve for Happy. And it's actually an engineer's look at happiness. How can we actually program it in our brain, not from just doing meditation and being positive, but actually solving it as an engineering problem. And Mo's goal is to make 1 billion people happy from his movement. He's actually taken a hiatus from Google and he's doing this full time. This man lives it, eats it, and breathes it, because much of his life he was successful, but he wasn't happy. And it wasn't until 3 years ago when he lost his son in a tragic operation accident when he went to the hospital that he realized that Ali, his son, had taught him the most valuable lesson. And that is not to get involved in the grief and the anger of losing your son, but to actually find a way to use it as a source of happiness. And it's so nice to talk to Mo. He got real, he got vulnerable. He also shared some really practical tips about what you can do right now to stay happy. Don't entertain that negative thought in your brain. Don't engage with it, and make sure you look out for your blind spots and all sorts of other things that cause us to be unhappy. It's not your natural state. We're all born happy, and that's what Mo was teaching us. So sit back. It's an amazing, amazing way to get inside your own head. And another thing that we're doing deep inside London Real Academy here at the headquarters is working on how to make you happy and how to make your 2018 absolutely amazing. We've got a set of 18 high performance habits, from mindsets from Jocko Willink, from behavior and movement routines from Ido Portal, from affirmations from Dan Pena, and we put them together in 6 weeks in order to make your 2018 the best it's ever been. It's called the Life Accelerator, so check it out. And now it's time to get happy with Mo Gawdat. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mo Gawdat, the Chief Business Officer for Google X and author of Solve for Happy. After realizing that wealth and success was not ultimately making you happy, you applied your engineering mindset and went on a quest to find the equation for happiness. 10 years later, after devouring countless amounts of information on the topic, you were put to the ultimate test by the sudden and tragic loss of your son, Ali. This had led you, through this book, to embark on your ultimate mission, to make 1 billion people happy. Mo, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
I had to revise that intro because it used to be 10 million, and now it's 1 billion. So you need to tell me how you go 100x on those goals, and what that's all about.
Well, when the goal is worthwhile and it's working, why hold back? I think that the mission, the 10 million happy mission, is not for me to achieve. It's been the entire universe that's been conspiring to make this work. And the story of 10 million happy was when I lost Ali. Ali was the person that mattered to me most in life. He was my son, he was my best friend, and he was my coach on the topic of happiness. As a matter of fact, we can talk about how much he helped me to find my own happiness and find the model. And so I went out to try and get 10 million people to find happiness as a result of his loss, as my way of honoring him. But it seems to me the universe likes this idea because, it's been exploding. We estimate, myself and the champions of Solve for Happy, we estimate around 23 million happy already. And so, if you revise the target upwards, it would be like silly if you said 30 million instead of 10, like that's sandbagging in business. We don't sandbag. And in the world of the internet, if something is working, 1 billion is not a very large number. It's actually quite achievable.
Well, you work for Google, so you've seen these kinds of things scale.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've been there for 11 years, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did that teach you maybe that this is not a dream, that billion?
It's not a dream. It's not a dream at all. It's very, very doable. And in the world of the internet, I mean, everything I've ever done at Google is in billions. And, by the nature of my very first job at Google as, VP of Emerging Markets, I was responsible for expanding Google's presence into, if you want, the next billion user, and then the next billion user, and then the next billion user. And it is not unrealistic at all to expect that if you build a good product that addresses the real problems that people are facing, that it will scale to billions. And part of my experience has been, to help open half of Google's offices worldwide, but that wasn't about building an office. It was about building the technological infrastructure for the local internet. So for you to have an office in Kenya, you need to have Google search in Swahili, and to have Google search in Swahili, you truly change the entire access to information for a whole population. And so there is a very systemic way for how you can build movements or build products that will address the needs of a few people versus how you build them for billions of people. And it's very predictable. It's a skill that I think I've acquired over the years, perhaps because the universe wants me to use that skill to scale this mission to where it should be.
I had a guest in here named Simon Sinek, and he has a talk called Start With Why. Mm-hmm. And he argues that it's the why that really gets these
so true
organizations to scale and to move. And I read a book called In the Plex, which is a kind of a history of the start of Google. And when you look at the why of the founders of Google, it starts to explain some of the behavior and why they do certain things. And they started off, why was the page blank in the beginning? Because they weren't trying to advertise, they were trying to solve a problem. And I was wondering if you learned something about kind of that why.
It's absolutely the core of the issue. I mean, if you think about, most of us are so drawn into the what and the how. It's like, I'm going to build the next photo sharing app, and I'm going to code it into that language, and it's going to be better than the previous app. But no one really asks themselves, why do we need another photo sharing app? And I've it truly in 1 billion happy, the why is the core of the challenge, right? The why is, let's put it this way: if you realize how big the problem of unhappiness is in the world today, you would realize that we're definitely not going in the right direction. I mean, think about our lives today, compare that to 50, 60 years ago. We have much higher life expectancy, our health is better, the supermarkets are full of food, you know, the technology that we have access to, the whole way of life is so much easier than it used to be, and yet we're so unhappy. Antidepressants are an $18 billion industry. Teen suicide is at an all-time high. Depression in general, is estimated to be 1 in 4 people in the modern world, and more even in some of the countries of the modern world. It is an epidemic. It's something that really needs to be addressed, and you'll be surprised. Most of the technology, if I can use the term technology, that described the challenge of happiness has been, if you want, ancient technology. It works perfectly well. We spoke about meditation, before we started the show, and how meditation can completely change your life. And yes, it works, but it doesn't, unfortunately, address 2/3 of our modern world population today, which by training elect to be more left-brainers than right-brainers. And an engineer's approach to happiness has been really finding a tremendous acceptance between readers and audiences of videos and talks and so on, because suddenly the language I'm using in Solve for Happy is a language that is understood by the majority of our modern world today, by the young generation and the professionals, even older generations, that have elected to be left-brained. So the why here is a big question, because I would dare say, if we don't manage to fix our value system from the values that brought us so far in the last 60 to 70 years to values of happiness and compassion, I would dare say that in an age where the machines are going to be doing most of the work.
Is that where we're going?
We're going to be in big trouble if we don't prioritize our happiness and compassion.
I mean, you're under the hood in Google X, so you probably know where we're going.
You don't need to be under the hood. It's not a secret at all. I mean, just look at what's happening. Look at how far artificial intelligence is going. I mean, the world's chess champion has been a computer for a very long time. The world Jeopardy champion is Watson. The world Go champion is DeepMind from here in the UK. It's not a secret that computers are becoming intelligent. They're becoming more clever than we are in specific tasks, and they're going to become more and more clever in the future. There is no secret in that. You don't have to be in Google X to realize that. And you're in a situation when you need to start asking yourself, okay, so when that next wave of technology takes place, what's our society going to look like, right? And it's a big question, and you get so many answers that come from everyone's area of expertise. So the technologists will say, we're going to find an answer in technology. The control freaks are going to say, okay, we're going to do it with regulation. And the reality is, no, these computers, if they outsmart you, you need to get them on your side. You need to get their value system to align with yours. You understand how that works, huh? We have computers today, it's still early, huh? We have 10, 15, 25 years until they're smarter than we are, but the seeds are starting to happen today. There's learning today, let's say, at the rate of a 2-year-old infant, okay? Now, how do you teach an infant to become a good son or a good daughter when they grow older? Is that by telling them what to do? No. It's actually by becoming a good parent, by becoming a good example. And our computers are just mimicking the patterns of our intelligence, right? What they're doing really is they're looking at the world out there, and they're scouting the internet to understand, or they're scouting whatever data we provide them to understand what intelligence should be. Watson, to become the world champion of Jeopardy, had to read 200 million documents. Can you tell me what he's finding in those documents? He's finding violence, he's finding greed, he's finding competition, he's finding ego. And if we keep feeding that as our top values to the computers, we're not going to have very good teenage children when they become teenagers.
So we don't necessarily have to program to become good entities. They will become us.
They will become better versions of us.
Okay.
More exaggerated versions of who we are.
Not necessarily better, more exaggerated.
More exaggerated.
And if we don't change our game, then they will just become bigger versions of us.
Yeah.
And then everyone will be unhappy.
Everyone will be unhappy. And the question, I mean, by the way, I'm extremely optimistic that we're going to get this done. I mean, think about this. The best examples in chess today, we tried to compete against the machines for a while, and then they started winning, and then we no longer have a competition where some human is sitting in front of a computer trying to win in chess anymore, right? We know that they're going to win, right? So, but how do the competitions now work? A human and a computer together play against a human and a computer together. That cooperation of us and the computers being aligned to achieve the most intelligent result, the most intelligent approach to chess, is the model that we want to have in the future when we and the machines together try to solve global warming, right? And so how do you do that? You build a value system where, as the computers scout for intelligence, they realize that happiness is the priority of daddy. Assume that I'm daddy of that computer now, huh? If they realize that you and I, the way we post content on the internet, we're saying, hey, I care about my happiness. My happiness matters more than my career or my ego, or, you know, if my happiness is my priority. And by the way, I have the compassion for not only wanting myself to be happy, but wanting you to be happy, and wanting our camera crew to be happy, and wanting my friends and my family and everyone that I interact with to be happy. That is the value. So that the computers will learn, so that when they go out there and interact with the real world, they start to realize, hey, daddy wants happiness, let me solve for happiness, right? Let me make them happy, let me have the compassion that it needs so that humanity becomes happier in the future.
Okay. The country Bhutan, I remember a few years ago, came out with their gross national happiness metric. And it was, hit the news headlines, and then everyone forgot about it. But of course I remember it now, because this is where a government's actually putting a metric on this. And then that's kind of daddy, maybe incentivizing people to follow that metric. Is that something to look at? Is that a sign of where we need to go?
It definitely is. I mean, Dubai is also doing a great job on that now. But the reality is the power is shifting, right? So governments will measure what I call the underlying infrastructure that's required to achieve happiness. Let me explain what that means. It's extremely hard for someone to find happiness if they're working 3 jobs and unable to make ends meet, and the kids are hungry at home, or if there is no, if the basic needs of a human are not met, and many of our race are actually struggling in life today, with hunger, with famine, with wars and so on. It's hard to ask those people to be happy. But when we manage to offer the basic requirements, the basic needs for our life to be sustained, further growth in income doesn't make us any happier. So what governments are doing is they're trying to provide that. It's like, we're going to give you what you need so that you can focus on your happiness. The question becomes, do we actually focus on our happiness? Do we take charge and say, thank you for offering the infrastructure? We're going to take it from there and make ourselves happy. So interestingly, I don't think that the impact of 1 billion happy is going to be because of governments, because of influencers, because of even 1billionhappy.org itself as a foundation. I think it is up to you and I and everyone watching to prioritize their own happiness. We can only offer them the tools, the infrastructure, the requirements that they can use, the resources that they can use to find that happiness. But believe it or not, the choice from now on is going to be up to the individual. And because of the way the internet world works today, the balance of power is shifting. You can see that everywhere. You can see that the Arab Spring is triggered by the people who get access to information, who get, where the balance tilts to a new opinion because of the information available online. Can we do that when it comes to happiness? Of course we can. I mean, understand this, the total content on the internet is doubling more than multiple fold every year, right? We're posting so much out there. Can we as individuals, you and I and everyone watching, decide that my next Facebook post is not going to be to rub it in and show others that I'm having or pretending that I'm having a great life and a great meal just to rub it in, and instead have a Facebook post that says, hey, I found something that made me happier. I want you all to be happier. Why don't we just help each other out, right? That kind of change in our value system, if President Trump tweets something, strange next time, can we respond by not attacking and being aggressive and being dramatic can we respond by saying, well, in the logic of this, I don't think it's true. Maybe we should consider that. And by the way, this is not personal. I don't want to attack you. I don't want to make our value system, you're an idiot and because I'm not, or the other way around. Can we start to have values where we show our infant, newborn, artificially intelligent children that we're worthy of being good parents?
Okay. Now you brought up the age of Trump, and so I might as well talk about it. I've got my mom, she lives in California, and she came and visited me, and I started to realize how divisive it can be in the States right now.
And again, really divisive.
All you have to do is look at Trump's Twitter feed and this back and forth, and I don't like you and you don't like you. It doesn't look like we're headed to our billion here.
Absolutely.
And so what does that make you do differently to see that kind of diatribe going on, especially in the internet world, company that you're involved in, or is going kind of the other way, it seems, on the surface? Or are you optimistic about certain things? Or do you see something I don't see?
So I am very optimistic because of the simplicity of what my happiness model portrays, right? It really is not that complicated. It's how mysticism sometimes overcomplicates things. Happiness is not complicated at all, okay? Happiness follows a very simple equation. Your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your expectation of how life should behave, right? The event in itself has no power to make you happy or unhappy. It's the way you process the event in your head that makes you happy or unhappy. Now, okay. I get the question of how can we be happy in the age of a presidency that is so unlike my value system or my intentions or whatever. I get that when I teach in the US very, very often. And I often ask people and I say, can I ask you a question? If you had not been watching television for the last 18 months, would anything in your life have actually changed at all? Okay? And most people go like, no. I'm with my same boyfriend, I go to the same job, I'm eating the same food, everything's exactly the same. There is just so much drama happening in the media around my president and what my president is planning to do, and and the way he speaks, and the attacks back and forth, and people who like him and people who don't like him. Seriously, is this helping anyone out? Is all the drama making things better? Is it making the conversation go anywhere? I mean, if we were in charge, truly and really and honestly trying to make things better, isn't there a better conversation, a better language that we can use, instead of just saying, I disagree with you, whatever you're going to say, I'm going to disagree with, and we end up in the kind of divide that we see now, not only in America, everywhere in the world. There is divide everywhere in the world. I come from the Middle East, where for a very long time, I'm not making this up, until age 36, I didn't know there was a concept called Shiite and a concept called Sunni. I honestly didn't, right? And then suddenly it was introduced into my life, like, hey, they are the bad guys. Seriously, they are the bad guys? Where does that come from? I mean, how can we categorize everyone who agrees with President Trump to be good or bad?
So this is a media conversation we can choose to ignore and choose to have our own conversations that have better aims.
3 layers. Layer number 1 is, do I let the events make me unhappy, or do I prioritize my own happiness? Okay? Layer number 2 is, do I allow myself to make others happy, or do I allow myself to make others unhappy? Layer number 3 is, how do I engage positively to make the world a better place? It's to make my life better and to make the world a better place. Ranting at each other on tweets doesn't change anything. It makes me unhappy, it makes the other guy unhappy, and it doesn't improve the world in any way. Why are we doing this? I mean, seriously, okay?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, we put a lot of videos out on YouTube, and every now and then there'll be some drama will pop up.
Absolutely.
And I came to the conclusion one time a few months ago that if it actually happens on the internet, maybe it didn't happen because it hasn't affected my life, it hasn't affected our mission. Everyone that comes in here loves having conversations. Everyone loves listening to them. It's just someone's out there doing this thing. And
absolutely.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter at all, at all, at all. And if I get so many, for videos that go viral with millions of views, I get tens of thousands of comments, right? Many of them totally thrash me. Like, hey, I'm out there trying to make people happy. Like, seriously, why? Even if I'm wrong or an idiot, just help me out here. We're trying to make everyone happy, right? Does it really matter? If someone, has a different opinion, it doesn't at all. If it happens on the internet, it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But I want to take you to another interesting view of this. Sometimes when I teach Solve for Happy, I go to people and I say, okay, let's do a quick experiment so that we understand that process of unhappiness and how it really works, right? And I ask people, are you okay for us to do that? Are you happy for us to go through this? Everyone raises their hand. The conversation is going well. The presentation is really amazing. Everyone's happy. And then I go like, close your eyes and think of something that makes you unhappy, right? I'm not making this up. Within 4 seconds, you can see faces drop. Like, people really, it's so easy to go to your brain and say, hey brain, bring me something that makes me unhappy. And your brain goes like, seriously, I'm allowed to tell you about the things that are making me unhappy? I have 67 of them. Which one do you want, right? Within 4 seconds, you're unhappy. It's unhappiness on demand, okay? It's like literally the Netflix of unhappiness, right? And then I show them something on the screen that distracts them. Everyone smiles, everyone laughs. Within 4 seconds, they're back to happiness. And I ask them what just happened here. And in an engineer's mind, this is what I call a full cycle simulation. I took you from happy to unhappy and back to happy, right? And then I ask them what happened here. Question number 1, between T0 when you were happy and T1 when you closed your eyes and became unhappy, did anything happen in the real world? Was there any event that took place in the real world? And they go like, no, I just thought about what my boyfriend said a week ago, right? It's like, okay, but nothing actually happened. So the unhappiness was triggered by nothing other than you starting to think about it, right? Between the T1 and T2, when you became happy again, when I showed you distracting things on the screen, all that really happened is you stopped thinking about it, right? So your happiness is not a result of an event in the real world, it's the result of the thought, right? More interestingly, you can stay unhappy by focusing on that thought for 20 seconds, right? If I told you to focus on it for 20 minutes, absolutely, the brain will oblige and make you unhappy for 20 minutes. Does anything actually happen in the real world as a result? Right? If you're unhappy because of something that your boyfriend said a week ago or your girlfriend said a week ago, by staying unhappy for 20 minutes, will he suddenly pop up and say, I'm sorry? Will you go back and erase the event? Nothing will happen. So think of it this way. From an engineer's point of view, this is the most stupid process we have ever invented, right? It is triggered by nothing, it makes you feel miserable, and it results in nothing. Why are we doing this? Why is another tweet response or another angry, rant in the streets, or why? Why don't we just become simply engaged? Like, look at it, say, I agree with this, I don't agree with that, here is my point of view, I would like you guys to understand, and we move forward, right?
Okay.
Without the drama.
And these are some of the principles you talk about in here, because when I saw the title, I'm an engineer like you, all right? And so I thought, how can you solve for happiness? I was taught at MIT that we could solve for the physics problems and the chemical and the engineering problems and the thermodynamics, but happiness, it's this, it's this thing we can't measure, we can't solve for it. So what makes you think you can solve for it? And also, how do you quantify the 23 million? How will you quantify the 1 billion people for happiness?
Two very interesting questions. So you can solve for anything if you know how the machine works, right? So the fundamental concepts of Solve for Happy is a simple assumption that this physical form of mine was born happy, right? I was born happy. When I was a child, I didn't need anything other than my physical needs met. for me to be happy. I didn't need an Xbox to be happy. I didn't need anyone to tell me, hey, nice haircut to be happy, right? You just understand.
My son is 1.5 years old, and I always tell people, he's just happy to be here.
Exactly.
He wakes up and he's excited to be here.
Exactly.
And I thought to myself, then why am I not?
That is the entire premise of this book. So the premise is, you had a machine where the default setting was happy. Then something changed. If we find out what changed, we can fix it, like we fix any other machine. And what changed is that for us to navigate the modern world that we live in, we have to start believing in certain concepts that truly are illusions, right? The reality of the matter is, even in the UK today, post-Brexit, and with the events that took place in the government in the last couple of weeks, we're still so much better off than the rest of the world. You want a problem comparable with Brexit? Go to Syria. This is a real problem, right?
Yeah.
You know, now let's put things in perspective. If you see the truth, most of the time, there is really no reason to be unhappy, right? We are trained, because our brains are survival machines, we are trained to look for what's wrong. We're trained to criticize. We're trained to say, this is not what I want, right? But we should be trained to fix the machine instead of focusing on the problem. Like you and I, when you had your business career, when someone walked into your office and started ranting about issues, you would simply say, to change the conversation, you would say, so what can we do about it? Is there a solution? Is there something we can actively engage to engage with to influence the situation? This is exactly what it's all about. You move the thoughts from the midline areas of your brain to the right-hand side of your brain. You solve problems, you experience the world as it is, and you become happy again, right? Now, with that attitude, I did a couple of things around Solve for Happy that I think were quite unique. The language of Solve for Happy is very much like a user's manual. Here is the machine, here is how it works, here is what triggers happiness, here is what triggers unhappiness, here is what goes wrong, here is how we fix it. Very, very, very engineered in a way.
Very.
The other was an avoidance of the unmeasurable mysticism of, say and you'll be happy. No,
Okay.
I try to explain to you why makes you happy. Okay? When you know that, you may decide, instead of saying to listen to Pink Floyd. It's your choice, right? And it will get you to the same result, and it works, right? Going back to measurement, because that was the second part of your question. How do we measure? The 10 million happy mission was measured by 3 parameters, right? One is that you realized and understood that happiness is not because of the events of life, it's because of how you interact with the events of life, it's because of how you think of the world, and accordingly, you're in charge of your happiness. If you change your thinking, if you change your approach to those events, you will find happiness. It's very predictable. Then I gave myself the target of offering tools in the book or online for free, so that if you prioritized your happiness, you had the resources and the tools that help you train yourself and find the issues and solve for happy. And third was that element of compassion, that you didn't stop there. You didn't just prioritize your own happiness, but you paid it forward. And the core of the 10 million happy mission, and now the 1 billion happy mission, is a very simple exponential function. Is that if you, everyone watching today, if you find this important, that you're going to tell 2 people who will tell 2 people who will tell 2 people. It's a very simple exponential function, right? If each of us tells 2 people and makes them promise to tell 2 people, within no time at all, my calculations would be around 3 years, the entire British population will get the message, right? The billion happy is a 5-year target. If we follow a simple doubling function, a simple doubling time of 12 months, from where we are today, next year we'll achieve 60 million. The following year is 120, 125 if we're optimistic. The following year is 250 million, 500 million, and 1 billion. Okay, it's not that complicated. 2 people telling 2 people, telling 4 people, 4 people telling 16 people, and so on.
Okay, but how can you measure it? How can you find out if it worked or if people are happier?
In the world of the internet, everything's measurable. You can see how a video is is watched. You can also see the number of shares. You can see the number of likes. You can see the number of comments, and so on and so forth. And it's very, very measurable when you realize that I didn't measure watch time or the number of incidences of people watching videos. I measured a lot more the number of people who shared those videos forward, the kinds of comments that they used. I also measured the feedback on the book. So 96% of all reviews on the book across the world are either 4 stars or 5 stars. That means they got the message. They prioritized their happiness. On average, around 80% of reviewers will mention that they actually shared the book forward to 4 or 5 friends. And so the movement is happening.
Okay, and that's how you do it. There's 3 sections in here which I think are really interesting. I'd love just to get you to maybe summarize each one. The first is the 6 grand illusions, the 7 blind spots, and then the 5 ultimate truths. And I was wondering if you could just kind of briefly, because that's pretty much the bulk of the book. One of the things that came to my mind is that a simple gratitude practice, which I try to do every morning, is I've just realized a way of changing my expected reality from my current reality. Because if I present myself a gratefulness mindset, then I'm kind of retroactively saying what I expect, right? And that can make me happier.
That is an excellent example. So gratitude works. We all know that, right? If you have gratitude for your life, you feel happier. There is a ton of research behind it. There is a ton of Buddhist practices for that. There is a ton of Hindu practices for that, and so on. We always knew that, right? Now, take gratitude in light of the happiness equation. So the happiness equation basically says your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your expectation of how life should behave. Our brains are constantly engaged in comparing events to expectations. If the event meets the expectation, your brain does an amazing thing. It leaves you alone. That's all it does, really. It leaves you alone, and your default setting as a child is happy. If nothing is upsetting you, you're happy. The challenge happens when the event doesn't meet your expectation, and so your brain wants to alert you that something's wrong by giving you an emotion of sadness, of worry, of fear, of guilt, of shame, and so on, right? Take gratitude. Gratitude simply is, I am grateful for the events of my life. I am okay with life as it is. Life meets my expectations, right? So by showing a sense of gratitude, by feeling a sense of gratitude, by definition, your happiness equation is solved correctly. It's as simple as that. Now, this is what I try to do in Solve for Happy. I don't tell people go and practice gratitude without explaining how the machine works. I tell people, when you practice gratitude, it works because this is how it impacts on your happiness equation. Okay. Now, with that in mind, the reason why we're unhappy most of the time, or more than we should be, not most of the time, more than we should be, is because we're solving the happiness equation wrong. It's really interesting. And that's the 6 and the 7 part of the model. When we solve the happiness equation, looking at events and expectations, using any input data that is not true, the result is going to be wrong. Garbage in, garbage out. Okay? Now, the reason why in the modern world our happiness equation breaks very often is because of the 6 grand illusions and the 7 blind spots. Now, let me explain those at the top level. The 6 grand illusions are skills, concepts that we learn to associate with in the modern world that appear to be working, but that are not what they really are, okay? So take, for example, thought, okay? Thought is highly glorified in the modern world. You and I are no longer paid to carry heavy objects or to, farm a field or whatever, right? We're paid for the quality of the intellectual property we can generate in terms of thought. And so thought becomes so glorified in the modern world that we not only think very highly of thought, we equate our whole being to thought in the form of I think, therefore I am. Right? Now, thought is real. Thought is not an illusion. I think, therefore I am is an illusion, because the reality is I think, I am, therefore my brain thinks. That's the reality, right? I am, I exist, whether I think or not. whichever form you believe your existence is in, whether it's the physical form or the spiritual form, you exist. And because you exist, you think, right? And I normally do a quick exercise with audiences in my workshops where I talk about, the biological function of your heart, for example, is to pump blood around your body. Do you think of yourself as blood? You don't, right? I'm sorry to ask, do you think of yourself as urine? No, the biological product of your kidneys is to produce urine. None of us thinks of ourselves as urine, right? However, the biological product of our brains is thoughts. It tries to crunch all of the events around it, all of the stimuli that it gets into one concept that it calls the event of right now, and that is a thought, right? Or the event of what happened last week, and that's in the form of a thought. Yet, for some reason, we start to tell ourselves, and I am my thoughts. I am the biological product of my brain. Now, here's a very interesting question. If it was you talking to you in your head in the form of thoughts, why would you need to talk? If it was you talking to you, you wouldn't need to say anything. You would know what you want to say anyway. The reason why we talk is because our brains truly turn the concepts around us into thoughts so that we understand them, right? And that's proven, by the way, with MRI studies. In an MIT study done in 2009, they gave participants in MRI machines, word puzzles. And the participants would sit in the machine, they would solve the problem, the right-hand side of their brain would light up, and then the verbal association engine, the verbal association part of the brain would light up for up to 8 seconds before the participant actually perceives the answer in the form of a word. Your brain solves the problem and then turns it into English because that's the only way you can comprehend it.
Okay.
Right? Now, so what is the illusion in that case? Thought is real, but I think, therefore I am is the illusion. If we can bust that illusion, your approach to life changes drastically because you no longer have to obey all of that crap that's going on in there, right? Suddenly, you start to deal with your brain, honestly, as a third party. If it says something nice, wise, you go like, great, thanks brain. If it says something stupid, you go like, where the hell did that come from? Like, go find me a better thought, right? I had a friend of mine who used to call her brain Becky. Okay. And I said, why Becky? And she said, Becky was the most annoying girl in school. She would always take me to the corner and talk to me about things that make me feel bad about myself. Remove the illusion, and suddenly your relationship with thoughts become very different.
Okay, you're not controlled by them. You are a separate entity yourself.
Absolutely. They're presented to you, and so you can make choices with them. Okay. Now, that is one form of illusion. I think, therefore I am is an illusion. I am, therefore my brain thinks is the reality of the illusion. Okay? With that separation, I'll tell you how I deal with my brain. With that separation, my brain is allowed only 2 types of thoughts. It can either bring me a joyful thought or a useful thought. Okay? If my brain brings me a painful or useless thought, I go like, thanks brain, that's not good enough. Go bring me a better thought.
Okay. And you guard that like with all of your life, your current brain state. And that's something we don't do. No. We allow the brain to go into these things and we can wallow in them, right? The sadness. And for you, you are just vigilant, I'm guessing.
Like a businessman. It's like if one of my employees walks into my office and talks for half an hour about something and rants and rants and rants, what's my typical reaction? I'm going to say, good, I understand the problem. What can we do about it?
Sure.
Can we turn it from ranting to action, right? I'll give you 2 examples, even though they're a little painful sometimes when I think about them. But when my son Ali died, my brain jumped into thoughts that were torturing me, right? One of them was the thought of, you should have driven him to another hospital. As a parent,
you were in Egypt on vacation with him.
We were in Dubai.
In
so
Dubai,
he came to visit in Dubai. And
this is years ago.
2014, yeah. So three and a bit years ago.
Okay.
And as a parent, your primary responsibility is to protect your child. So when you take him to a hospital and a mistake happens and he dies as a result, your brain has every right to say you should have driven him to another hospital.
Right.
So it's a valid thought, right? But then 4 hours in, I started to tell my brain, and what can I do with that brain? Can I go back in time and drive him to another hospital? Can I erase that in any way? What can we do now? Can you give me a useful thought instead of a useless thought, right? The thought of sitting down, documenting his happiness model, sharing it with the world, hoping to get 10 million people to become happy as a result, hopefully so that they send him a happy wish, and that would be a way to honor him, right? It wouldn't bring him back, understand, but it would be a better place than just sitting there and telling myself you should have driven him to another hospital.
And you made this conclusion after 4 hours because you both had been studying this concept of happiness for so long.
And because the universe helped us out, because God, if you want, helped us out. We received the call 4 hours later from the Dubai government saying we're going to do an investigation, this is not going to go unpunished. Do you mind if we perform an autopsy on Ali's body? And his mother was sitting next to me. I said, would you mind? And she answered the most brilliant answer ever. She said, would it bring Ali back, right? And would it bring Ali back really sets you to, anchors you to the truth that all of the negative thoughts ever from now until the end of your life are not going to bring Ali back, okay? Ali left. This is it. He's not part of our physical world anymore. All you can do now, life was here when I hugged him for the last time. It dropped all the way down here. Do I want to stay here? Because that's a choice I can make. I can say I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life, or I'm going to decline even further, or I'm going to make tomorrow a little better than today. Baby steps, right? I'm going to make after tomorrow a little better than tomorrow. And to engage in a useful thought helps you do that, okay? To engage in a useless thought of, you should have driven him to another hospital. Oh, what good is that, right? Where does this take me, him, or anyone in my close circle and in my world, right? That's number one. That's useful thoughts.
So you made a choice right then that no, we weren't going to have the autopsy because it would have kept us in this right, blame, whole mindset. Why?
Vengeance, anger,
which can ruin people's lives.
Which does ruin people's lives.
And that's probably the default. That event would probably ruin 95% of people's lives.
It's absolutely true.
And cause more unhappiness to all the people around them.
Absolutely
not only
true.
Would they not be being proactive by helping them, but
and it would not bring the one we lost back. Okay. Right. Of course, by the way, for everyone to know, we did want the investigation to happen not for Ali, but for the next child to be protected, for the next patient in a hospital to be protected. That's the right thing to do. But you don't want to do that with the emotional drama that ruins everyone. Okay? Right. You want to do that in a practical, engaged, positive way. Realizing, by the way, and I say that openly in front of everybody, hopefully the doctor that made the mistake that took Ali's life sees this. I know for certain he didn't mean it, right? No doctor wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to kill a patient today and ruin my career. He wanted to ease Ali's pain. But we're humans. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. When I make a mistake in my business, I lose a deal. When he makes a mistake, he loses a patient. And as painful as that is to me, that the patient was my son, he didn't mean it. He didn't. Why would I have that vengeance against him? It's just not the right thing to do. Okay.
Can you speak about Ali and what he was like and the kind of person he was like?
I can speak for hours about Ali and
because he's in this book.
Yeah, Ali was a gift. He was a very unusual young man. He was a very unusual child to start with. He rarely ever cried. He rarely ever frowned, and he was. I had him when I was very young, so we were very, very close friends. We played a ton of video games together. We laughed a lot together. He was the funniest human being you will ever see. But he was also so wise. It was really, really shocking. I mean, when Ali became a teenager, I actually started to make him my absolute main mentor. He was my coach, okay? And as a teenager, this is like seriously shocking. But by age 16, as I write in Solve for Happy, by age 16, I started to notice how wise he was, that I started to tell myself, when I grow older, I want to be like Ali, right? And it's really shocking how much he taught me about happiness. And about many other things, by the way. He always had that ability to sit quietly and listen, then listen more, then listen more. And instead of stating an opinion like, how all of us are now trained into debate, just to prove the other person wrong. Ali had that ability to ask a question and say, Papa, did you think about it this way, right? Do you realize that? Can you focus on this element of the problem? And I would sit at awe and say like, man, how could you just see it that way? But that wasn't the thing about Ali. What the thing about Ali was that constant peace. So like all of us, he was constantly faced with things, that make us unhappy in the modern world. Someone says something bad, or he loses something, or whatever, right? And Ali had that ability to bounce back. Like, you could see him physically changing into a little bit of unhappiness, and then an hour later he would bounce back and he would say like, exactly what I'm trying to tell you, a joyful thought or a useful thought, right? He would tell himself, Papa, I know that I lost that game, I forgot it, and it makes me feel unhappy that I don't have it, but what can I do now? I went back and I searched for it. It's not there anymore. So maybe I should just focus on what I'm going to do now. Maybe I should save to get another copy of it, or borrow it from one of my friends, or right? What is dwelling on it going to make, going to change, going to impact on my life, right? And he had that wisdom to him that was incredible, really. And Ali had that kindness. He just wanted those around him to be happy. He just wanted those around him to become better. And the last thing he asked of me before he died is he sat us down 2 days before he died. It seems that he knew he was dying. I don't know how, because the surgery, his loss was all of a sudden, really. But he sat me down and he said, Papa, I realize how much of an impact you did with your work at Google and launching search and all of the stuff that we spoke about. And I realize that you want to make the world a better place. I want you to never stop doing that, but I want you to start depending on your heart a little more often. Okay? I, no exception, being a professional, have always focused on on my left brain, right? I'm logical, driven, and I'm actually dead center when you do my my Myers-Briggs or whatever analysis. I'm between EQ and IQ, but I prioritize IQ. And he was telling me, start to depend on your heart a lot more often. And in a very interesting way, it simply translated when the day he died into this mission of, Papa's, enough of you impacting the world with your thoughts and methods and equations and business, and right? Let's impact on the world with the happiness model that we wrote together, share this, pay it forward. And that's what ended up being Solve for Happy and being the 1 billion happy mission.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Amazing, amazing, amazing compassion, amazing ability to turn hardship into bliss.